a pleasure to be here at the 2021 Society of Ethnobiology meeting, and I'd like to share some of the work that I've been doing on cultural landscapes and historic environments along a particular place called the Venango Path in western Pennsylvania. We're lucky in Pennsylvania to have had a relatively deep and broad scholarship of Native American paths that particularly has been put together by Paul A.W. Wallace, who was a professor at Lebanon Valley College and then started working for the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission. And that work was embodied in this book to the right here called Indian Paths of Pennsylvania, which has incredible detail in terms of what Wallace was able to put together in terms of the direction and extent of Native American trails. And what I'm going to talk about is this trail all the way to the left on Wallace's map, and that's called the Venango Path, and it extends all the way from the Forks of the Ohio, which is present-day Pittsburgh, all the way up to Presque Isle and Lake Erie, which is present-day Erie, Pennsylvania. The Venango Path project that I've developed has three goals. The first is to identify historic environments along the Venango Path noted by early travelers from journals, letters, and maps. And the Venango Path is kind of unusual in some ways because there is a volume of material from travelers along the path, all the way from the Forks up to Lake Erie. Also, to examine the evidence for cultural landscapes and past land use practices along the path, particularly Native American past land uses, and evaluate long-term environmental changes along the Venango Path's route. Now, the Venango Path project is kind of unique because really it provides a north-south ecological transect through space and time. It's approximately 120 miles in length, the whole trail, and it crosses three physiographic provinces. To the north, the glaciated central lowlands province along Lake Erie. The body of the trail was traveled through the northwest glaciated plateau and then ended in the non-glaciated Pittsburgh Low Plateau physiographic province or ecoregion. Now, to understand the Venango Path, you have to understand Venango itself as a destination, which was a Native American village and early on a British trading site. The name was derived from Onengi or Waningus, which means mink, in Lenape or Delaware. Historically, Venango was visited in 1749 by the French Céloron expedition, and then by George Washington and Christopher Gist in 1753, with orders from Governor Dinwiddie of Virginia to expel the French from the upper Ohio watershed. Historically, Venango is also the site of Forts Michaud, which was French, Venango, which was British, and also Fort Franklin, which was American. And it's the site of present-day Franklin, Pennsylvania. And here it is right now, right there from the Céloron expedition map. Now, there are many routes to and from Venango. So Venango was an important place. It was a nexus. And this crazy-looking map that I have over here is part of Wallace's map. And it looks like a funky-looking sea spider or something like that. But that white dot in the center is Venango, and all these paths converging on it. And the Venango Path, which I am going to be talking about, includes three different regions.
Do you have like an admissions person or somebody I should talk to?
Three different regions: the Presque Isle Portage, 1A, the northern route, which is 1B, and also the southern route here down to the Forks, which is 1C. And I'm going to focus primarily on the northern route because of economy of time. Now, the northern Venango Path was an access to the French Creek interior. It was a link between Venango and Presque Isle on Lake Erie, and it was used by many: French, Native American, English. It linked the French forts Michaud, Le Boeuf, and Presque Isle, 1753 to 1759, and also three Native American villages: Venango, which I mentioned, Cussalogastown to the north, and also Cussawago. Most of these were Delaware and Seneca towns. And also there's archaeological evidence for late woodland sites along this area as well: French Creek, the McFate 1, 2, and 3 sites, and also the Wilson Chute site. All about 1250 to about 1400. The French Creek watershed of Pennsylvania is a major watershed within the Allegheny drainage. It's largely glaciated, and as a result, the soils are often very diverse and rich. As a result, there's a variety of upland, wetland, and freshwater habitats. Indeed, the freshwater biodiversity of French Creek is the highest in Pennsylvania. Now, one of the more famous visitors to the French Creek area, the northern Venango Path in 1753, was George Washington. And George was a surveyor and also a land speculator, so he had an eye for landscapes. And in his journal, which he published in 1754, he talked about grasslands along French Creek. Quote, "We passed over much good land since we left Venango, and through several extensive and very rich meadows, one of which I believe was nearly 4 miles in length and considerably wide in some places." Now, grasslands weren't unknown from Pennsylvania, but they were not of this type of extent. So these were very, very large grasslands that had formed along French Creek. In 1760, 1759, and 1760, Colonel Henry Bouquet made several observations of the environments along the Venango Path and French Creek following the retreat of the French in 1759. And this quote is really great. "Venango, the finest meadows I ever saw, some 2.5 miles long." Again, just like George Washington was saying, these grasslands are extensive. "And 1 mile wide without a tree or bush." And I love this. The grass, 5 feet 8 inches high. I want to bet that Henry Bouquet was 5 feet 8 inches high. So these are tall statured grasses that are in these grasslands. And possible native grassland species known from Crawford County, where the trail was going through, include big bluestem, Andropogon garardii, switchgrass, Panicum virgatum, Indian grass, Sergastrum nutans, and also freshwater cordgrass or prairie cordgrass, Spartina pectinata. And this picture to the right shows freshwater cordgrass along the Allegheny River, and that's me. I'm about 5'9", so that grass is probably over 6 feet in height and flower, tall stature. Evidence for cultural landscapes from some of these writings are basically focused on how the forest, in particular along the Venango Path, looked. For example, Thomas Hutchins, who was a very important observer of the environment along the Venango Path, also mapped it, was a soldier surveyor that worked under Henry Bouquet. From his journals, he said, "Traversed little hills and low bottoms for 4 miles and then encamped. The woods are open and very young." Also, "We met with the richest meadows I ever saw, quite clear for more than 2 miles in length and half a mile broad. Marched 13 miles, excellent food." And he wasn't talking about Burger King or anything like that. He was talking about fodder for horses and cattle. "Fine open woods, but no timber." Again, sort of a young savanna type of area. Also important was a Moravian surveyor, Jacob Eyerly, who went through the area in 1794, and he made many observations of historic landscapes and provided some information, some evidence, I should say, for cultural landscapes. He says, "The French Creek track is a very rich land with many clearings in the bottoms where the Indians used to dwell." Again, Native American land use in terms of clearing, either for habitation or agriculture. "Where these bottoms are not cleared, they are densely overgrown with white walnut." And you know that's also butternut, a very important food species, wild cherries and the like. And I love this line. "I have seen hawthorns there that were 12 to 15 inches in diameter." I spent a lot of time in western Pennsylvania forests, and if I see a hawthorn 3 inches in diameter, that's a honker. So this is what I would call old growth hawthorn, all sorts of trees in the upland. And part of that reason is that this area along the Venango Path was densely populated by refugee Delawares that moved from eastern Pennsylvania. And this quote here by Charles Lee in 1759, "thickly settled by Delaware Indians." So these open woods may have been created by Native American land use practices. Now, what about these extensive meadows? Were they created by land use practices? Well, studies of phytolith accumulation suggest, maybe not, that these French Creek meadows arose 3,000 to 7,000 years ago as a result of a warming period during the hypsothermal. So they may be sort of climatic edaphic grasslands and possibly associated with the extension of the Prairie Peninsula of Transeau. And Thomas Hutchins' map gives us some good detail on French Creek and the location of grasslands here, Mingo's Meadows and Large Meadows. And if you georeference Hutchins' map in GIS, you can see that they overlap in two particular areas, one near Meadville, which is his Mingo's Meadows, and one in the vicinity of current-day Waterford or LaBeouf. And if you use the 1954 SCS soil survey, Caretown soils are indicators of grasslands, and indeed, what do we find? We find areas of Caretown soils particularly concentrated in Meadville, and this is the Wilson Chute site right over in here, which was a late woodland site. So Meadville was a hot spot for grasslands, as shown in Hutchins' 1778 map. So, to sum up, cultural landscapes and historic environments along the northern Venango Path, there's definitely evidence for possible fire use and clearing in woodlands, particularly by Native Americans. The grasslands are interesting. They probably emerged as a result of a climatic drying event during the hypsothermal. And further ground truthing and GIS work is needed to sort of tease out what might be the locations and origins of these grasslands and woodlands along the Venango Path. So I thank you. I'll take any questions at the end of the session.